Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's Floss and it's time for 2016 worst reads. Now, of course, this comes with the disclaimer that it's my opinion. It's not your opinion, of course. This is my opinion and my interpretation of these books. If you love these books, if you love this author, if you are this author, great, more power to you. You're absolutely able to enjoy it. For me, they just didn't connect, and I'll explain for each of them a number of reasons, but I'm sorry. That being said, let's get to it, because I got some doozies up my sleeve. The first book is Losing It by Kara Cormack. This disappointed me for a number of reasons, including the fact that I actually really like Kara Cormack's Texas Rust University series. This book, though, was one of her early works, and man, can you tell it. It is just... It's very amateur-esque in terms of, it's a story of Bliss, who's a virgin at college, and her professor, who she inadvertently hooks up with before he starts working, and then she sees him in class, which is all fine in a way, but like there was no actual chemistry or heat. I didn't understand why they were together in terms of, sure, there was like, we fell in love because we were like hot, but there wasn't any relationship that went beyond them having this we must be around each other kind of stuff. I felt there was no friendships around them that was built up beyond one character who was meant to be sort of the almost triangle kind of situation. The friendships were very beyond their relationship, were very underdeveloped. I just didn't buy it. The next book that I just didn't connect with was Until Friday Night, and this is by Abby Glines, an author who I have tried a couple of times to get in with, and I'm sorry, I can't stand it. I find her, and I was actually looking forward to the series because I like Friday Nights, the TV show. I like the idea of a football team and the whole thing like that. And it's obviously a sexy kind of new adult novel, but oh man, this was bad in terms of, this frustrated me more than the Cora comic because this was actually offensive in parts where the behaviour of these boys and the way they treated the girls, the villain-esque girls who were sluts and whores and whatever, it was the virgin and then the whore complex in terms of the pristine, beautiful girl who has never been touched by another boy is to be idolised, and then the girl who sleeps around is just to be treated like trash. And these boys' behaviour, even like the relatives of these girls, would just treat them so terribly. It was just the worst. And the girls themselves were just like, the pristine girl was just so awful about the mean girls, and then vice versa, but just like in the most cliched, stereotypical way. The agency was taken out of certain characters just because we had to do things. I just hated it. And I've read it out of the end just to see how bad it was. And again, for me, the chemistry wasn't there enough, in that some of these books that I read like this have similar mistakes, not to this level, I gotta say, but I forgive them in a way because I buy the chemistry, I buy the relationship. This I didn't buy. And then all of a sudden they're together and she's like, all of a sudden she decides to speak after being mute for no real reason, sort of. Slutty whore men are not to be adored, while the same behaviour in a woman is abhorred. That's the crux of what I hate about her, is that the way she lets the boys behave and then gives them hero status of redemption, and then the girl gets behaves the same way and is just given the worst language around her, is fucking stupid. And I have no desire to read the next books in the series, whereas sometimes if I love it, I'll still read the next books in the series. No, this just was bad. Next book on my worst list was the final book in the Fifth Wave series, The Last Star by Rick Yancey. There wasn't anything I hated per se in this book. I just think he didn't stick the landing on this. And I was kind of waiting to see what would happen because I didn't love book 2. And this was sort of, unfortunately, didn't answer my problems of book 2. It almost made it worse. We kind of still are combining a commercial action blockbuster with a esoteric examination of humanity and trying to put them together into a very small cast of characters to do that with. And it just didn't work for me. And then there was like an epilogue thing that it was even more a bit pushing the believability factor. For me, it felt like Rick Yancey got lost in this. And I could tell about midway through book 2, and I could see why there was delays in the publishing schedule. And now I feel like I know why. Maybe they just never caught, like, this is a bit like Lost in a way. Like, book 1 had this great idea, but I don't think in the heart of hearts the execution was landed. And I would wonder if the author would ever admit to saying, I didn't quite know how to end it. I don't know. Yeah, sorry, disappointing. Another disappointing one that I really kind of just was a bit about, and I kind of went in thinking this is going to be great, and I had great hopes for the author after hearing her talk, was the Melissa De La Cruz Something in Between story. It's a story of Jasmine and her imminent departure from the US based on her immigration status, and she falls in love with the son of a senator who has a very anti-immigration status platform. And I liked that all of this sounded like a great setup, but it was so basic in that the characters, not the age of the characters, but the emotional connection to the plot of these characters, I just did not feel in that. This was a story that was very close to Melissa's heart, obviously, and the author notes in the back, she talks about how close it was to her own personal journey. And I did not feel it. I don't know if it was me. For some reason, I was never anxious about Jasmine's progress or her journey. I felt her relationship took center stage, and in that relationship she exhibited the worst of herself, and she was such a hypocrite about the way she treated people. And yes, she realized it in the end, but almost too late in the end for something she was so advocating for in her own life to be doing it so blatantly in your personal life. I just found that so hypocritical, and not in a good way that like the author managed to address. I really wish that the book had explored more intimately how the family was affected by the immigration. The parents had some stupid choices early on about why they just didn't tell the kids, and then all of a sudden they were going to be leaving and packing up their lives and letting their daughter spend years driving herself to get into colleges, knowing that that was going to happen. And yes, I can understand people make those silly choices, but there was no consequence for that choice, and there was no discussion of that choice even. I don't necessarily think consequences happen all the time, but there was no discussion about that choice beyond a small one. And I kind of feel like that got sidelined for a bit more of the juvenile romantic stuff that I just wish had been not sidelined. I feel like the romantic angle was okay, but there was some avenues and stories that we didn't need, and some juvenile behaviours of like, oh, just grow up, kids. You're facing really adult stuff here. Grow up. And the final book in my worst of is my worst of for so very many reasons, but just I hated it. And I did finish it, but boy did I hate it. I was just like, by the end of it, I was going like, I was screaming at the book. And it is Happy People Read and Drink Coffee. Now, I was so not excited. I didn't expect this to be like, amazing book of the year, whatever. This sounds good. It's a story of a woman who's lost her family, and she's a year later deciding how to recover, and so she decides to move to a very remote town in Dublin, Ireland, to kind of really find a way away from everyone's prying grief eyes, and this is how she finds her way back to being able to manage that life, her own life. No, this was not it. This was smoking, drinking French lady is a bitch to everyone around her, then moves to another town, is a bitch to everyone around her there, strangers included who offer her all kinds of manner of support, and not in an invasive way, but in a, we're just here for you if you need us. But no, she's rude to them. Then she hooks up with a guy who's equally rude to her, and they both fail to communicate except to talk about how much they kind of maybe like each other, but not to each other. And then the stereotypical villain-esque ex-girlfriend turns up, and she is just like the worst, but also the worst because bad writing worse, not because she's like actually a villain, but she's just given the worst plots and the worst reasons to be there, and it's just stupid, and I couldn't stand anybody in it. And she's rude and mean to all the people around her, and so is the main character, and I kind of wish they'd all gone off to their own individual towns and not hooked up with anybody. It was dumb, and I hated it, and I just thought, what was the point? And everyone was just, so a waste of time. It's a French adaptation, be aware of that. And I don't know if maybe it translates a bit more caringly in French, but it does not work out well here. So this cover and this title are incredibly misleading. This is not what you think it is. Boo. So that was my 2016 worst of. Again, I say these are my opinions. You can completely disagree with me. That's the joy of reading. Reading like food. Not everyone can like the same things. Otherwise, how boring would the world be? So fight me in the comments below if you disagree with me about some of the books. If anything was your favorite, I'd love to hear from you. Don't come at me, but let's have a chat about it. I'm sorry I didn't connect with it. Hopefully 2017 will be filled with less worst reads, but at the same time, not everything can be perfect. I'll see you for the next review soon, guys.